Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly office hours. My name is George Soto, one of the co-founders here at AssetMule, joined by my sidekick and CEO Justin Dorfman, and then our good friend and product marketing expert Jonathan Pipek, who is the founder of Blue Manta Consulting. And we're going to dive into a topic which I think everyone's trying to figure out, like, right? We got to figure out how to actually like optimize our go-to-market strategy, and it's definitely not any easier these days. And I know we've been saying that certainly for as long as I've been in business. People are always like it's harder today than ever, and blah blah blah, and all that stuff. But it's certainly, I think, feels a little different these days, especially with the amount of channels that you're kind of tasked with trying to kind of figure out a strategy around and the best practices, right? Like the experts like Jonathan used to be kind of like at a consulting organization or siloed away somewhere. And now you have the ability to teach these best practices at scale. So we're going to dive into kind of identifying the blind spots and then leading to breakthroughs through a go-to-market audit. So without further ado, Justin, maybe you can set the stage for today's kind of topic, and then Jonathan, if you can give folks a little bit about your quick background, but I'll pass it along to Justin real quick.
Awesome. No, I'm super excited. Jonathan and I have been friends for a while now. I think when we were first starting to think about AssetMule, and he was very helpful and very generous with his time. And over the years, obviously we've gotten to know each other, and I've always sort of pinged you with questions that I've had around go to market. And I think maybe a couple of months ago you were telling me about this GTM audit framework that you were starting to work on, and fast forward to recently, we've just launched a new product, followed up by AssetMule, and I'm asking all the questions that I think you kind of help answer in your GTM audit. So I thought, a little bit selfishly, why don't we get Jonathan on here and I can get some answers to these questions that I have, but at the same time, maybe we can share it with the rest of the community. So that's really the idea today. And yeah, Jonathan, maybe you can give us a little bit of overview on your background and this GTM audit that you've put together, how it all came to be.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me, Justin and George. It's been fun getting to know AssetMule over the last few years and both of you. Yeah, so quick background on me, spent over a decade in B2B SaaS, B2B product marketing, worked across kind of a wide range of company sizes and industries, everything from like, Fortune 500 insurance, mid-size HR tech, cybersecurity startups, kind of a whole host of startups and SMBs. And about like almost 3 years ago, I was like, look, love the startup space, but working on the same startup felt like watching the same movie every day. And I was like, I want a little bit more variety. So started a product marketing agency. And now it's still the same. It's still a movie, but I get to choose, hey, today we're watching a horror. Tomorrow we're doing a comedy. The next day we're doing a rom-com, so on and so forth. So you get a little bit more variety. So yeah, really enjoy that. And as far as the go-to-market audit, like I think we've all felt kind of the same go-to-market pain points, regardless of what company we're at, right? Like you're not sure who to target. You have ads or events that don't convert. Maybe your sales team goes and does a pitch and it just like falls flat. Like literally on the Zoom call, like there's just pure silence. Maybe you're getting crushed by competitors, especially like the new AI competitors, right? If you're kind of an old school SaaS product, you get a ton of pricing objections. People buy the product, then they don't use it, and then they churn, so on and so forth. And what I realized over time is like the startups I worked with kept going back to the same three things when they ran into these obstacles. They either doubled down on what wasn't working. So like, the classic like VP of marketing is like, oh, you guys are doing 3 blog posts a week. I want 6. Like we're gonna crush this by just doing more work. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't really work, right? The other one, which a buddy of mine at a previous company named Random Acts of Marketing, which I'd never heard before, which I thought was genius. But it's where like someone, usually it's C-suite, but someone in C-suite or sales is like, hey, why don't we do, insert new, marketing thing that's hot, like a TikTok video or a TikTok challenge or whatever. That'll get sales, right? So like Random Acts of Marketing that just like come out of nowhere, no real strategy, just like do it. And then the third one was like silo solving. So, they were looking for like one specific problem that just like was the cause of everything versus like looking at the whole picture. So like, I always go back to like the doctor example. Your entire body hurts, like you have pains and aches all over your body, and we're just going to focus on like your pinky, and we're just going to solve your pinky. And it's like your pinky's pain. It's like, well, that doesn't really solve the underlying issues. So these kind of 3 approaches, I kept seeing them over and over, and they felt like a waste of time, a waste of resources. And I was like, why don't we look at this more comprehensively? And then the other thing I saw that I think both of y'all will appreciate, because correct me if I'm wrong, both of you have strong backgrounds in sales. I think Justin, you were in sales before product marketing. George, I think you've always been in sales and marketing as well. And obviously you both sell as part of AssetMule. But the sense I got from a lot of product marketers is that they were looking at this from a very selfish perspective. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but I mean that in the sense of like, they were looking at all the product marketing aspects. And I was like, well, hold on. You got sales over here that's part of your go-to-market. You've got customer success over here. You've got product. You've got all these other different support, et cetera, all these other different pieces that are part of your go-to-market motion. Why aren't you auditing them? And just like silence. Like I figured y'all would potentially resonate with that.
For sure.
But that's kind of where this was born. And it's basically looking at this and your go-to-market from a comprehensive, like system-wide perspective and saying like, hey, let's fix the root causes, not the symptoms. This is like the engine check when you take your car in. Like, let's look at everything that's wrong with the engine, not just that like specific sound you hear, and figure it out. So that's kind of where it started.
Resonates pretty deeply, Jonathan. And just real quick, for the folks out there, like the ability to align with these other stakeholders and other departments and audit and understand what the hell is going on with them is so important to you succeeding. And so in a way, if you want to be selfish, great, but you need to leverage the insights from these other folks to be selfish, right? So I just wanted to kind of mention that.
Oh, for sure. Like how many times has marketing come up with like a quote unquote great idea or product marketing, and then you hand it over to sales and sales is like, yeah, this is crap. Like how many times have you all been given like a 15-page doc and so like go forth and conquer, and you're like, guys, like I don't have time to refer to a 15-page doc on a sales call. Like give me 4 bullets and that's it. So yeah, I totally hear you.
Awesome. So what does this look like in the real world, right? Let's say that you have been hired by a company to come in and help them run a GTM audit. Where do you start? What are the different pieces that go into a GTM audit? How long does it take? I'd love to just kind of hear a little bit about what that process looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the entire process is a lot to throw into a 45-minute call, like in depth. So maybe we'll do like high level and then jump into questions. But long story short, it involves kind of like a few different components. So one is just CRM analysis. In my experience, no B2B SaaS startup I've ever worked with has had like clean or good data, but we do what we can with like the data that exists, just getting a sense of like who's buying, who's renewing, who's growing their accounts, right? Whose sales cycles are faster, so on and so forth. We do a lot of interviews like internally and with customers. So we go talk to customers, get a sense of kind of how, why they bought, how they would describe in their own words, so on and so forth. We do a lot of internal conversations. So conversations like typically like CRO, CMO, CPO, sales reps, so on and so forth. And then we basically audit every aspect of go-to-market a little bit more deeply. So the 5 I think we can cover probably on this call, or maybe the 4 would be like ICP and personas, position messaging, pricing and packaging, and then competition. I think that'll be probably enough for 45 minutes. But those are the big 4.
Makes sense. I guess to maybe kick off some of the questions, and everybody that's listening, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll sprinkle those in as well. But I guess first question is: are there any sort of common issues that you see, like in most situations where you're doing an audit, this is a key issue or a key gap that exists?
Yeah, so like one of the ones that's like super common, and by the way, a lot of people that listening to this are gonna say, oh, that's not my company. Take a second look, because I found a lot of times it is. Even if you're making, like, even if you have 30 million in ARR, companies are still doing this wrong. Is they say, oh, we know who our customers are, we know who our ICP is, and then you dig into it and you're like, well, hold on, you said your ICP was mid-market, right? Yeah. When I go to your website, I see logos for all enterprise clients. Are you going after enterprise or mid-market? No, we're going after mid-market. Okay, cool. I just went and talked to your head of sales. He said you're going after mid-market, but then when I went and talked to your reps, they all have enterprise on their lead list. They're all enterprise clients because they make more commission. Did you set up your commission structure to reward enterprise versus mid-market? Well, yeah, we did, but that makes sense because they make more money. Okay, but do you see how that would incentivize them to go after bigger clients versus your ICP? Yeah. And isn't your support cost and your onboarding costs higher for you, so you're less profitable when you go after those enterprise? Yeah. Okay, do you see how there's an internal mismatch? And they like, you literally go through this with them, and they've realized that like who they think their ICP is not their ICP. Sorry, who they think their ICP is not who they're going after. And you go and look at the marketing campaigns, and those marketing campaigns typically are more aligned to the ICP, but then sales doesn't want to follow up because they get paid more with the larger clients. So it's like, guys, if this isn't aligned, kind of exactly what you said, George, like 2 minutes ago, like it doesn't work.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, you're just like bringing up stuff that
PTSD.
I think, yeah. It's just like, for the marketers out there watching this, if your sales team is not incentivized to help you, right? I mean, you just articulated it, masterfully, Jonathan, right? At the end of the day, incentives, right? And, and this goes for alignment, right? Like if I'm not going to spend the time doing something, especially as a salesperson, like Justin and I talk about it all the time, right? As it relates to our product and the areas that we need to kind of automate. If I, as a salesperson, have to do something that I'm not incentivized to do, hence is not going to like almost 100% guarantee that it's going to move the needle, I ain't doing it. And for all the sales leaders out there, you all know, like for the last 30 years, we've been asking sales reps to update the CRM, whatever it is, properly. And guess what? Updating the CRM ain't helping them. In fact, they can argue that it's taking time away from actually closing deals. So, this audit, like, it makes total sense. And how this falls through the cracks, like, baffles me.
I got a question on ICP, Jonathan.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're being, if you're defining your ICP enough, or if you're going narrow enough? And the reason I bring this up is I just, I'm a product marketer, right? I've built, GTM strategies, and I've always been a big believer in narrowing the ICP and really, really being focused. And I've made this mistake over and over again, and sort of like fallen back on it. And most recently, with this new product that we just launched, followed by AssetMule, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was having coffee with a mentor, and we were talking about the ICP for this product. And I was like, oh yeah, it's SaaS salespeople, right? And he was like, that is not narrow enough. You really need, like, I'm going to push you to go really, really narrow, to the point where you feel like you're going too narrow. And if you're going too narrow, it's okay, because it's just a starting point. And it really got me thinking. And eventually now we're really focused on digital sales rooms for founding AEs, SaaS AEs, right? So really, really narrow, really, really focused. And for the first time, I feel like our messaging is starting to resonate. We're starting to see responses to outbound and so on. But even then, as we're working on the web page, there was this, like, on the homepage, there was this sort of like, maybe I should put some bigger logos in there, or maybe should I go that like narrow on the header, in the hero and stuff like that. So just curious, like, what are the things that you advise in terms of how to go narrow, and how do you keep people like in line with doing that and not falling back to going too broad?
Yeah. I think what your mentor said is spot on. I think you go as narrow as you can in the beginning, and then go a little bit broader. Like, you never want to go super broad, but you go a little bit broader. I like to do, and this is kind of like a little cutesy thing I made up, but like, I like to look at what I call the 3 M's. So metrics, marketing, and mindset. So what I mean by that is, like, I start by looking at metrics. So one, just a quick caveat, everything has to be like tested, right? Just like y'all have tested everything with AssetMule as you built it. Like, you have to test these things. So the assumption here is you've gone out with some kind of message, you've tested it with some kind of ICP, you've tested it, and you have results. So assuming you've done that, you look at the specific metrics. So like you mentioned, outbound for sure, right? What is the response? But 2, sales cycle length. So is there a difference between this type of customer closing versus this one? Does one close faster or slower? I'll give you one example. So, the founding sales reps fall under sales reps, right? They're a subsegment. But if you go on LinkedIn, like, they probably don't have the term founding sales rep. That's just not something very common, right? So I worked at a company where we targeted managed service providers. They're basically like outsourced IT, just to keep it simple. And what we realized is, man, like, some of these MSPs close way faster than others, and we didn't know why. And what we realized is that, and this is going to sound kind of strange, but it was basically they had a growth mindset. So some of these folks wanted to grow their business into tens of millions in revenue. Other folks were like, look, I bring in 300 grand a year. I'm cool with that. I don't need to bust my butt. Like, I'm fine with that. And nothing wrong with that. There's just two different mindsets. And the folks that were in that bucket of like, look, I want to grow my business. This is not just a lifestyle business for me. Like, I want to make this into a big thing. I want to get acquired or merge with another company or sell it, whatever. Like, those were the folks that were perfect fits, and they converted, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times faster at higher ACVs than the others. So again, looking at the sales cycle length, obviously conversion rate, do you have to fight them on pricing, product adoption, right? Are they using the product once they buy it? Once they've come on board, are they being upsold or cross-sold? Churn rate, are they churning high, referral rate, et cetera. So first, like, I basically look at a ton of metrics. The second one, I look at marketing. So, when you're auditing, you're looking at like the website logos. Is RFP, is the term RFP anywhere on the site? If so, I'm assuming you're targeting enterprise versus smaller companies. Is your pricing set up for high volume? In which case, probably enterprise. Is your sales team doing outreach to the same folks that you think you should be doing outreach to, et cetera? And then the last one I think is really helpful to audit is your mindset. So I literally just go and ask like key leaders around the company and key sales reps, like, hey, who's our ICP today? Who is it going to be in 12 to 18 months? And ask what they say, like, see what they say. And when you ask sales, like we talked about, like, see who they're incentivized to go after today. And if there's no alignment, you're way off. So I think the short answer to your question is, like, one, go as niche as you can, then test it, then look at metrics, marketing, mindset, and then adjust accordingly.
I love the mindset. Quick question, kind of the double click on the logos piece, right? You mentioned, like, you're doing this audit and they have like these enterprise logos. And then I think sometimes folks think that if they put a recognizable logo, like, I don't know, whatever, let's say you're selling enterprise and you put IBM on there, or you're selling, let's just say B2B software, right? And you put IBM because you have IBM as a client, that even though you're selling down market, it gives you a cool factor, or they're like, well, if IBM will use it, then like we should be able to use it. And if we can afford it, why wouldn't we? I think that's why when I've had these kind of debates with folks in the past, that's kind of been the thinking around that. Do you have any opinion around that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be an aspirational group that wants to do that, but the 99%, it's sort of like, if anyone, watching this, or if you all work out, when you go to the gym and you see the guy that's like twice your weight, lifting like 4 times the amount of weight you do, and doing like this crazy exercise you've never seen, you're like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I don't want to destroy my back. Like, I'm, maybe if you're like 16, you'll try it. But like, once you're, over 25, you're like, I'm good. Like, that's what these folks see, is like, they go on, they see IBM's on there, like, wow, that means, one, assuming the pricing isn't even on the page, right? One, pricing must be insane. Onboarding must take forever. And 3, this must be like a really hard to use product that requires hand holding. Like, that's what flashes through their minds. So rather than them saying, hey, this is something aspirational for me to try to do, they say like, man, that workout's way too hard. I have no desire to do that. Or, man, that's going to screw up my back. Like, I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you.
The next piece that I think you mentioned in your framework is positioning. So let's say now we have the ICP down and we feel pretty good about this ICP. We feel that it's narrow enough. Everybody's on board with it. How do we go that next step with positioning? And what I've seen a lot out there these days, and I'm a big believer in this as well, is it's more about differentiated positioning, right? Than it is about like, shooting your own horn and all that stuff and talking about how good you are. So how do you determine whether your positioning is differentiated enough, whether it's resonating with that ICP that you've now defined?
Yeah, that's like such a good question. Like so many startups are like, oh yeah, we're really, really clear. We're really differentiated. And my team and I will go in, evaluate the top competitors and say like, hey, and like, by the way, if you're like a little bit edgy, you can try this, like, be sure you're tactful about it, but like replace the logo on like, not the homepage, because most people know the homepage, but like go to a different page, maybe like a product page that's like 2 or 3, rungs down the navigation, and like replace the logo with their logo and replace like the product name with their product name, like competitors, and run it by someone and say like, hey, what do you think of this competitor's page? And if they're not in product marketing, they probably don't know it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, it looks good. Like, so yeah, 100% agree with you. But assuming the companies already share their positioning doc, so I have a sense of what they think their positioning is, I typically start by evaluating the competition. So I'm looking for like the key things here on their website. So obviously the headline and subhead, but I'm also looking at like who do I think the ICP is? So it goes back to what we just talked about, right? I'm looking at the logos on the page. I'm looking at, do they have the word RFP anywhere? Do they talk about like customized onboarding or customized solutions? Do they have the word enterprise? That all points to larger orgs. If they talk about like easy to deploy, easy to use, they have pricing up front, the pricing is low, the volume is low, that tells me it's more startup focused. Also personas. So we did an audit for a client, and we realized that 99, like obviously not literally 99, but like let's say 4 out of 5 of their competitors targeted a specific persona, and only one targeted the persona they were targeting. So I was like, oh, already you're differentiated because you're just going after a completely different persona. The other thing is like, do the competitors have a strong point of view? What's the tone or feeling? That same company I'm talking about, the same client, all their competitors, I think 4 out of 5 were very like stuffy. Like it was very old school. It was very like legally. It was very, I don't know, very corporate. And then one of them was like way out here, like surfer dude style. And we're like, okay, well, we're not surfer dude style. We're not corporate. We're somewhere in the middle. And then also just pricing model, right? How do they price? That helps you kind of get a sense. So I start off with that kind of like competitive analysis. Then I look at sales calls. So, either recorded sales calls, or I jump on them, jump on current calls, just to see how prospects react to the pitch, right? Like I think both of y'all have been at multiple companies selling. Like, when you say, like, you finish your spiel and you look at the Zoom and you're like, so what do you think? And they just like kind of sit there and it's like pure silence. Like when I watch those, I'm just like, I struggle. Like, I just like, it's really hard for me not to say something when I'm on the call. But sometimes it goes like that. Other times the person's interrupting, the prospect's interrupting them, saying like, yeah, and they're adding their own fuel to the fire, and you're like, the excitement's going up, and like everyone's jazzed, and like, right? So doing that. I also like to talk to the customer advisory board, ask them to describe like competitors' products. And what's interesting is the customer advisory board is supposed to be like your secret weapon, right? They're supposed to know like your product better than anyone. They're supposed to know the market, competitors, etc. And what's crazy is you ask them to describe competitors' products, you record this obviously, and then you ask them to describe your company's product. And the difference in the words they use, I've had some clients where the difference in words is like night and day. You're talking about like, I don't know, peanut butter and jelly sandwich versus a steak. Like it's very, very clear. And then other times it's like, well, this is like a 60-day dry aged, ribeye, bone and ribeye. And this is like a 59-day dry aged bone and ribeye. And you're like, is there a difference? Like, could anyone tell? Like, no. So that's a big one. Now with AI, you can very easily scrape G2 or Capterra reviews and see how customers describe your product versus competitors. That's a nice way to get scale. I usually ask Perplexity or whatever AI I'm using, like, hey, show me the top 5 kind of themes of pros and cons for each product and for the competitors. So that's a really nice way to do it. And then again, this you gotta be tactful about how you do this, but swap the logos on the sites, replace it with a competitor. Does the positioning still work? If it does, then you're not differentiated. So I think, again, just to recap, because I know I said a lot of things, like looking at competitor sites, reviewing sales calls, talking to customer advisory boards, scraping G2 Capterra, and swapping logos on your site. And if the positioning is not differentiated, it's very, very clear very, very quickly.
Awesome. Hannah, first of all, thank you so much for engaging so much. We have an awesome product marketer out there. So some of the feedback, they love the analogy of working out. You're motivating me to get back into the gym, Jonathan, and get some food. So awesome. I know you've touched on this a little bit here, but maybe we can double click a little bit on like maybe some low hanging fruit signals to tell you that your team is like targeting the wrong ICP. And maybe this is a little different than like, the kind of the story that you mentioned, which is like, oh, internally it's mid-market, but then, we have messaging and things like that is clearly enterprise. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit and into more of the overall like ICP strategy.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give you some like, somewhat specific, somewhat broad examples. So one that's really common, and I'm sure y'all have worked booths before, obviously. So you ever been in a booth where you get a ton of attendees? And I mean, like, everyone comes by, they're kissing your butt, telling you your product's amazing. You feel jazzed. You're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then at the end of the event, you go to the person, whoever's scanning the badges or whatever the system is nowadays, right? And you're like, oh, so how many leads did we get? And they're like, oh, we got none. And you're like, no, that's not possible. I literally just talked to 20 people. Like, I sent them your way. They're like, yeah, none of them signed up. So when your events get a ton of attendees, but you don't get actual leads and actual buyers, that's when you know, oh, this is an ICP problem, or it's a persona problem. Because sure, they're jazzed, but they're not taking action, which means either they don't have the pain point strongly enough, or they do have the pain point, but they're not the right person to talk to, right? Maybe someone else has the same pain point, but has the motivation to kind of overcome that inertia. So that's pretty common. Like, that's a really clear way of saying, and it's really, really hard for founders because they tell you, I had such a good conversation. And it's almost like, sorry guys, this is going to be full of analogies. So if you don't like it, feel free to hop off. But it's sort of like, you're in like college, you meet this person you hope will be your significant other. You go on a date, it's the best date you've ever been on. Everything's gelling. Like, you leave that date and you're like, man, like, I knocked that out of the park. You text right after, like, everything's great. And then the next day you get a text that says, hey, I think we should just be friends. Like, that's the equivalent here. And that's when you know, like, you're targeting the wrong ICP and or the wrong persona. And if that's ever happened to anyone on the call, I sympathize with you. I met my wife at 19, so like, didn't have a ton of that, to be honest.
I remember those days. I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. The other one is advertising. So like, I literally cannot tell you how many startups I've talked to that spend, like, it's usually like anywhere from 10 to 20 grand a month on advertising for, I don't know, 6 months or a year. They blow through like 100K plus, and then they're like, man, this isn't working. And it's like, they get clicks on the initial ad, but people hit their homepage or hit the landing page and they don't convert. That's another one where you're like, you're not hitting the right ICP because it feels like, and by the way, this is assuming that the product marketing team has gone and revised the homepage or the landing page or the ad or all three to make sure, like, optimize conversion, so on and so forth. Assuming that's happened and you still don't have conversion, then you're targeting the wrong ICP, the wrong persona, et cetera, right? That's a very, very clear one. And it's really easy to test. That's why, like, every time people talk about like, oh, positioning, messaging, how do we test it? If you're not testing with ads, like, you have to. Like, yes, of course, test through your sales reps, but unless you're a massive company that gets a ton of at bats, like, you really just need to test through ads. And then the other one that I see a lot is content. So you'll create all these pieces of content. You'll get tons of downloads, like thousands of downloads. And people, it's like a VP of marketing will post on, or content marketer will post on LinkedIn, hey, I got 10,000 downloads for whatever asset. And you're like, great. Did any of those convert? They're like, well, no. Okay. Did any of them move down the funnel and convert like 6 months later? No. And by none, I don't mean literally zero. I mean, like, less than 10% or less than 5%. Okay. Well, then you're probably targeting the wrong folks. I'll give you one last example. I talked to one client their former client, where they had, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was like roughly maybe half of their budget was spent on LinkedIn ads. And the majority of their conversions came from events and that their ICP attended in person, and their ICP wasn't even on LinkedIn. So it's like, you keep finding these different areas where you're just like, guys, y'all are missing the boat here.
Makes sense. Yeah. The dating analogy, I also met my wife very early, so I didn't go through a ton of that, but as a founder, it resonated very, very
Right.
heavily with me. So I feel like this is one of the biggest mistakes that founders end up making. One of the biggest traps, right, is they do hundreds of customer discovery calls. And I'm a big believer in customer discovery, so I think you should do a lot of customer discovery. But in those calls, they talk about the problem, and the problem resonates with the person that they're speaking to. They talk about the solution that they're building, that they're thinking about building, and everybody says that solution makes total sense, right? And then they wonder why this person didn't end up buying, and so on. And again, you ask those two questions, does this problem resonate? Yes. Does this solution sound good? Yes. But you didn't ask that third question, which is, will you pay for something like this? Or are you the person to pay for something like this? Are you in the market for something like this, right? And I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces in customer discovery. And I've read all the books, the Lean Startup, and all that stuff, and it doesn't hit on that as much, right? So I've done that myself, where it's like, they said they had, like, the problem exists, and they said our solution sounds great. Let's go ahead and you start selling to this persona. You got that last piece of, like, do you buy this? Are you buying this? Are you looking for something? Or, like, would you spend money on this? I think is critical to validating that ICP.
Yeah, that's why those questions that salespeople, and by the way, I just got to defend marketers. I've been on both sides. I think I'm probably more of a salesperson, certainly in terms of functionally over the last 20 something years. But I got to defend marketers, and particularly product marketers here as well, because if you ask the question, like, does this make sense? Right. I get it. I've been there before, and I picked that up from a training thing. Like that a long time ago, like 20 years ago, that, like, the sales trainer was like, does that make sense? Because he wanted to, like, check in with, like, hey, am I, I think that we've evolved now a little more, and there's better questions, right, that you can ask.
For sure.
I think, to Justin's point, when you're out there doing customer discovery or discovery, within a sales context, as let's say an account executive, et cetera, there's these other questions that you can really ask to be able to dig in a little deeper and get that insight, right? And get that and push that deal forward. So if you are asking, does that make sense? It's a yes or no answer, right? Number one. And then number two, to Justin's point, we've done this a lot. And, as a founder, sometimes you're in the pool and you can't see, and it's easier to, in retrospect, kind of look back and go, oh, I sucked here or whatever. But it's like, that's not really what we're trying to solve for. Like, we don't care if it makes sense or not. At the end of the day, it's like, is, to your point, Jonathan, like, is it painful enough? Are you trying to solve this right now? Like, are you like, oh my God, when you see a solution and you're like, oh my God, I need that now. You're like, hey, I'm going to get off right now and ping my CEO or my VP or whatever. And, like, I'm going to ping you in 15 minutes. All right, cool. Like, you can see that because there's this active pull from the market, right? So yeah, that's how I sort of interpret it as well.
Oh, for sure. And, like, the reality is, like, when product marketers do research right, this is less of a problem, right? Because you go from, like, the question you asked, right, is, does that make sense? It's already a leading question, right? Because you're implying it does make sense, number one, right? But number two, to your point, it's a yes or no. But if you start off broad and you say, hey, George, tell me about your day. Like, what's your day-to-day look like? Oh, okay, cool. Specifically when it comes to, I don't know, like, general creative workflows, can you tell me what that looks like? You talk to me about that. Okay, cool. Talk to me about product management. How does that work? You tell me about that. Any issues you have in project management? You tell me, oh yeah, our project management tool sucks. Here are the 15 pain points I have. I'm like, okay, do any of those bother you enough to, like, have you ever looked for additional solution? No, not really. Like, it's annoying, but we deal with it. So now in like, without mentioning my product at all, in, I don't know, 7 minutes, I've already uncovered that, yes, George, you do have this issue. You have enough inertia where you're not going to change and move, and you have it for the last 4 years, even though you've had the same problem for the last 4 years. So I think if you do research right, you can eliminate a lot of this. And then Justin, to your point, I think folks are really scared to charge for something that they haven't either proven or built or so on and so forth. And what I go for there, or the kind of midway point, is like, fine, you don't want to charge them, like, for the actual product. So, like, you don't want to charge them, let's say it's $5,000 for the product. Fair. Charge them to be on a wait list. Charge them $100 for a wait list. Charge them, I don't know, $500 for a wait list, like, to join the wait list. If they're not willing to do that, then you know, like you're done. Like it's just not even worth moving forward. But if they are, then it's like, okay, well maybe this has some legs. So I think there's like in between points for sure.
I wanted to dig into pricing. I think this is a topic that is evolving very, very quickly right now with AI startups and how AI should be priced or is being priced. I'm just curious. First of all, I would love to hear about your audit process for pricing. So, what are indicators that pricing is working or not working? But then I'm assuming you've started to, work with some companies that are thinking about how to price AI products. And we've lived in this world of like per seat pricing for a long time now, a couple decades now, and it seems like things are quickly changing. So I'd love to hear your viewpoint on what you're seeing out there. Are there models that are working? Are there mistakes that people are making when it comes to pricing AI products? I'd be really interested to get your take.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you asked like 3 or 4 questions. So I'm going to try to remember them all and answer them all. I think one was, what do you see like in terms of like when pricing doesn't make sense, right, as you audit it? So one, like a really common one, which I'm sure y'all have felt, is when sales and sales leadership disagrees with finance on either discounting or on product tiers. That happens. I think that's happened at every company I've ever worked at. And I don't know, 60% of my clients probably. Just because I don't work on pricing with every client, obviously. So that happens a lot, right? Where sales is like, oh yeah, if we discount this 5% more, then we'll get the sale. And finance is like, no, absolutely not. Like this is the line, you can't cross it. That's always a big one. The other one is like packaging or bundling, right? Finance wants less bundling, sales typically wants more, or vice versa, right? Maybe finance wants to increase ACV, so they're like, hey, bundle these products and charge a higher ACV. Sales is like, no, that's going to slow down the sales process too much, so on and so forth. Again, I'm sure both of y'all have experienced that. The other one is when pricing isn't justified, doesn't feel justified to prospects. They're like, yo, why am I going to pay whatever, a 50% markup over your competitor? Like it doesn't make sense. The other one is like, you're always going to get churn after pricing goes up, right? Like we've all done pricing migrations or product migrations or price increases. You always have a level of churn that's acceptable. I think when you have outrageous churn, so I would consider outrageous churn like anything over 10%. That's when, honestly, at some companies, even anything over 5%, that's when you're like, okay, like we need to look at value to price comparison. So those I think are signs of kind of when things aren't going well. In terms of like how to audit, there's a lot of different approaches. I think I'll focus on like 3 for the purpose of answering your question. I think one is separately have sales leadership and finance leadership define pricing, define acceptable discounts separately, and then compare the two. And it's so eye-opening when you see like, sales floor is like down here, finance's floor is up here. Finance is trying to hit that 60% margin for B2B SaaS, right? It's like kind of the minimum threshold typically. Sales doesn't care about profitability. They care about hitting quota. Again, I'm not disparaging sales. I'm just giving an example. Sales, wants to maximize quota attainage or whatever. They want to close more deals, so on and so forth. So maybe they have a lower price, so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of a good step 1. 2, just looking at churn and renewal data, right? Is pricing a factor in departures? So I like to look and say like, okay, do higher ACV clients churn? Do higher, like you can also look at this in an interesting way where you're looking at what is the revenue of my customer and how does that compare to your price as a percentage? Because then what you can say is, okay, maybe I'm a $5,000 product and my customer is a $10 million company versus I'm a $5,000 product and my customer is a $100,000 company. How does, and I made up those numbers, so I'm sure they don't make sense, but whatever, you get the point. Like what is the correlation? Like, is it a bigger deal for smaller companies or not? And then the other one is just reviewing competitors, right? Like, are you positioned, as a premium company or premium product, but you're priced cheap compared to your competitors, right? Pricing and positioning misalignment is very, very common. Are your competitors just like way cheaper and provide way more value, so on and so forth? But in terms of like what you asked about AI, so AI pricing to me is super interesting and exciting. Is there a way for me to drop a link into the audience? I don't know.
Yeah, as a comment.
Okay, in the comments.
There.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me if this.
Yeah, if you pass it also, Jonathan, I'll go ahead and put it in.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that because it's asking me to like join things and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah.
So for folks who don't know Kyle Kyle Poyar is like one of the OGs when it comes to PLG, when it comes to pricing. He was at OpenView for a long time. So he has an awesome newsletter. Manny Medina wrote an article for his newsletter where he basically analyzed, I think it was like 60 plus AI companies and their pricing. It's really, really interesting. Very thorough article. Highly recommend looking through it. But anyway, I think the bottom line is like the fundamentals of pricing didn't suddenly change with AI. I think it's more that they're really important considerations. And the number one thing, which is the fundamental, which hasn't changed, is what is your goal and who's your target audience, right? Because if your goal is rapid adoption and you're going after a B2C audience and you're selling an AI product, a simple monthly fee, like flat fee, makes sense. That's what ChatGPT did, right? What is it, $20 a month or whatever it is, right? If you're selling enterprise and you're solving a big problem, that would require an employee, right? Your AI is replacing that employee or it's replacing a service company, then obviously you're going to price accordingly. I'll give you a real example. So I'm talking to an AI company, to the CEO of an AI company that's charging a flat yearly cost. So just for shiggles, let's just say it's 10 grand. But there's still like a human services element to it. So they're mixing AI plus human work. And when you do that, things become more complicated, right? So for this particular client, they have an all-you-can-eat model. But the problem is that a company that uses that service, let's say like 40 times a year, gets charged the same as a company that uses that service 4 times a year. And the costs on the back end, right, because there's that human element, are significantly different for the 40 times a year customer versus the 4 times a year. At the same time, they don't want to say, hey, we're going to implement a per use fee, because what happens then is you discourage usage. And we all know, right, what happens when you don't use a product, when it's an AI product, you immediately churn, right? So what I recommended was, why don't you start thinking about a tiered pricing model where you can say, okay, the average customer is probably going to use this service, I don't know, 15 times a year. Cool. That's going to be tier 1. It's going to be cost X. If they want to use it more, like let's say 15 to 30, great. That's going to be tier 2, so on and so forth. And the thing you also want to think about is like, what does the long-term look like? So what I mean by that is, if you're a startup targeting enterprise, and maybe this is going to be too definitive what I'm about to say, and people are going to disagree, that's fine. In my personal opinion, within 2 to 3 years, once you hit like probably Series B, your startup investors and your board are going to put pressure on you to say, hey, love that you're targeting enterprise, but we need to hit that certain revenue threshold. You have to go down market. Like in my experience, that happens 9 out of 10 times. So what's going to happen? They're going to have to adjust their pricing and the volume. So when you have a tiered way, when you've implemented tiers, it's so easy to do that, because now you say, hey, that 15 times a year threshold we had for enterprise? Well, we're just gonna reduce that by 2/3. We're just gonna say 5 times a year, and now we can lower our price dramatically and hit mid-market clients and expand our TAM significantly. So like, again, I think it's really, really important to think about from an AI perspective. Like, yes, AI changes how you think about pricing, right? There's per agent action, there's per workflow, there's per outcome, there's like all these different models. But again, you really have to think about like, what are the fundamentals of the business? Where are we today, and where are we going to be 12 to 36 months from now? And what is the board, what are investors going to want? Like, that's a piece that I think, especially product marketers, don't think enough about. They solve for the today. And I'm like, you got to try to future-proof, not in the pricing itself, but in the model. And if you don't, then you have to think about, okay, in 6 months, in 12 months, basically every 6 months from now, I'm going to review my pricing. And to your point, Justin, review my ICP, figure out how they align. And if my ICP has changed, or I've entered different verticals, different markets, or have multiple ICPs, I need to readjust my pricing. Like, you just have to.
That makes sense. And I'm a big fan of Kyle Poyer. I also want to shout out the Atlas team. Michael Hoya and Laura just shared a report that they have as well, some resources on. They're doing some amazing stuff in AI pricing. So I would definitely check them out as well.
Will do.
Awesome. I think we're out of time here. We could go on forever. There's so many so many follow-up questions and things we want to dig in, but really, really appreciate it, Jonathan, today, walking us through how you think about these GTM audits. I think these things are so important, and really appreciate you sharing the insights that you're getting right from the field.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me so much. Let me throw in, I think I have an article about this somewhere. But let me throw that into the chat real quick and go-to-market audits. Probably should have looked this up beforehand, but it's all good. Yeah, maybe we can post it after on the YouTube.
For sure. And Jonathan, maybe to close this out, and then George, I'll hand off to you to officially close this out. But why don't you share a little bit about, if folks want to connect with you, learn more about your work, where GTM audits want to discuss GTM audits with you or have follow-up questions, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. So I think this is on LinkedIn, so perfect. They can just click on, hopefully, my little avatar face thing. But yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I literally love go-to-market. I'm like the biggest nerd when it comes to go-to-market. I will talk about go-to-market for free for hours. I'm very hard to shut up. So if y'all have questions, happy to chat. Happy to do V2. Happy to go through all this. So
yeah, the only thing that I need is an in-person hug from you, Jonathan. I might have to fly to Chicago and get a hug. But,
So it's funny. I almost went to Miami this past week. My schedule got changed, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna hit up George." And then I'm in Orlando right now, but
nice.
Didn't get to go this time around. But we're hoping to get some good Cuban food in Chicago. No offense, but there's no good Cuban food. Once you've lived in Miami, it's like, yeah, Chicago's Cuban food is just subpar.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that would be cool. It'd be cool to figure out how tall everyone is. Like, I don't know. Justin, I just assume Justin is like 6'3". And like
you'd be disappointed. I'm like 5'8".
George, I don't know.
With shoes on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair.
George and I are both similar size, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
No,
big personalities.
What's
big
funny?
Personality.
Well, it's really funny because there was this, I do consulting work as well for startups, and one of my clients, I've been talking to them. All I see is their head, right? And then the other day we were doing a QBR kind of thing, and I was on a screen because they're in the Boston area, and I noticed my client was like, this dude was like 6'5", because I could, I was like, oh my gosh, like I totally had this inaccurate perception of, I don't know, it was just very weird to see this individual compared to others walking around, because I never thought they were that tall. But anyways, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom. This was like awesome. I not only did I learn a lot, but you just did a killer job just articulating on your insights. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in, everyone who commented, Brett, Michael, Ronnie, Laura. Just really appreciate the engagement. Hannah, it means a lot to us. We spend a lot of time putting these things together, reaching out to experts like Jonathan, so we can educate and inspire the ecosystem as much as we can, make our imprint. If you love these, go ahead and click on the follow button here on LinkedIn, or you're probably also potentially watching this on YouTube. We stream the YouTube as well. So go ahead and click on the subscribe button. If I do have to plug Follow Up by AssetMule. So check it out. It's followup.assetmule.ai. Check it out. You're free to kick the tires on if you like it. If you don't, let us know. We'd love to know why it doesn't quite resonate. And without further ado, have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.